So before we get into all the news today, I just wanted to bring you some Russian culture from Kyiv. The ultimate in Russian culture. This is what Russia has managed to produce in the past 300 years. The gargoyle and midget, the Moscow weasel, if you will, has been noticeably and understandably upset about Ukraine dismantling the Russian economy in response to the genocidal invasion that they've been waging now for the past almost 12 years. Stock market now crashing, majority of large Russian corporations now moving down to a 3 to 4 day work week, including the defense sector as of today. Gasoline lines all over the country, Ukraine destroying on average one Russian oil refinery every 3 days. Things are not going well in Russia. So this is what we get. Shahid drones and ballistic missiles being sent into Ukrainian apartment buildings. Last night was an 11-hour barrage. But look, my show is not about this. You can get this anywhere, okay? It's about what's happening in Russia. It's about the dismantling of Russia, the prison of nations. So we won't dwell on the bad news. Back to the good news.
And no matter what level of atrocity that the Russians attempt to dole out onto the good people here in Ukraine, no matter how many apartment buildings full of sleeping families that they send ballistic missiles and Shahed drones into, the situation back home in Russia only continues to spiral. As you can see now, the Altai region of Russia now adding to the list of affected regions that are spiraling into a fuel crisis as Ukraine continues to take out more of Russia's energy infrastructure, from the transport to the refineries, the production, export terminals. Things are only getting worse and worse. The Altai region, I'll show you where that is in a second because it's pretty crazy. Russia's fuel crisis continues to deteriorate along with the government's propaganda narrative. The governor of Altai region blames cost of credit, increased lead times for fuel purchased on the exchange. These factors have led to a backlog of gasoline deliveries, right? So he can't say, and no Russian government official can really say, and I don't think anyone can say this on television publicly or even post it to a Facebook account or Twitter or any form of social media in Russia, that it's because of Ukraine's strikes on Russia's oil refinery, its transport, its export terminals, production. They're not allowed to say any of these things because that would make the regime look weak. And as anyone that studied authoritarian regimes or their history, we know that that is the cardinal sin. Making the regime look weak is the cardinal sin and can lead to a quick and painful downfall for any authoritarian regime. And to give you an idea, this is Russia's Altai region, this little red spot right here. This is little old Ukraine. This is Crimea, that has managed to totally paralyze the Russian oil industry in the space of little over 2 months. Especially affected is this Pacific coastal area here, because what's happening is Russia's pulling oil from the ground. And in this area, Ukraine has been unable, as you can see, is fairly unable to strike these refineries. And so this is one region that's been unaffected. So what's happening is they're pulling the oil from the ground. They are able to refine it out here, and they're desperate for cash. So all these refined oil products then hit the export terminals. They bypass the Russian economy completely, and they're sent out to the foreign market in order to raise cash. The same as Stalin did during the Holodomor in Ukraine, where they basically took grain from anyone that had it and starved the population and immediately sent it out to raise cash on the foreign market for not only military adventures, but for global propaganda efforts and all the same things that are core to Russia's war on humanity that's been going on, since the 1950s. And it's not only the spiraling fuel crisis that the Russian government is eager to hide. In the past couple hours, I'll just read you what I wrote here. Locals are panicking near a military facility in Peresvet, Moscow region that's currently burning, with local authorities wasting no time bringing the USSR 2.0 style propaganda to deflect. Authorities are blaming it on an ongoing, quote, in quote, space rocket test. That's a direct translation. And I'll show you the space rocket test as it proceeds. Surely this is going to light up the Moscow night sky with the ongoing space rocket test. Several angles of the ongoing space rocket test are currently visible, with the locals freaking out. Lots of colorful language here. and the fires are only spreading. The space rocket test is, I don't know, this doesn't look anything like space rocket test to me. There's about 50 videos online with Moscow region residents absolutely freaking out because the fires are... Yeah, so of course the Russian government is once again bringing the propaganda. And let's check in on the Russian stock market. Oh my Lord, we have an absolute... we were at 3,000 only about what? Got about a month and a half ago. And we continue now down, looks like we're going to head into the 2400s in the next couple of days. Only getting worse and worse, as is the oil market. God, this is really selling off here. Let me get into this a little bit here. So this is the oil market absolutely being destroyed, and it's being destroyed. This past couple of days sell-off is it's not economic. This is a peace thing. This is peace in the Middle East. Peace does not benefit Russia. It's one of the reasons that Russia has been so, well, as I can show you here, has been so into funding terrorist groups like Hamas and the Houthis, funneling cash to any terrorist group that is willing to visit them in Moscow to pick up big bags of cash and weapons. Hamas, they need instability. This is what they need. They need to, like for the Houthis, for example, why do they fund the Houthis? Why were they helping the Houthis with intelligence in order to strike Western ships on the Red Sea just this year, just 4 or 5 months ago? They were doing this because global instability helps Russia. They need to bring down Western civilization in their minds. It's the same as their efforts where they were caught painting swastikas all over French cities, 6 months ago, or they were caught putting pigs' heads in outside mosques only a month and a half ago in France, or they were painting swastikas around German cities, in the 1970s, also in the 1950s. This is what they do: sabotage operations. They're not into building roads and building, pulling oil and gas from the ground and building a beautiful society and roads. They're not into that. They're into bringing down the world to their level. And when you have global peace, you have low commodity prices. Look at the oil price now. Absolutely off a cliff. This is very, very bad news for Russia. They are a commodity economy. And as you can see, the effects of all of this perfect storm that is engulfing the Russian hell state. I'll read you what I wrote here. Months of the largest Russian companies cutting operations down to a 3-day work week due to collapsed demand has finally reached the defense industry. This is out of Russian propaganda outlet Kommersant. They're trying to soothe the population to make sure that these collapsing economic narratives come to them in a sanitized way. The largest companies in Russia have all been switching, whether it's the largest car manufacturers or it doesn't matter, cement production, steel production. They're all switching to 3- and 4-day work weeks. And they have been. In my first couple of videos, this channel is about 2 months old, and it was some of the first things that I covered. I found most interesting. When you have an authoritarian kleptocracy like this, it's about managing the impoverished masses, and they have to do that they can't just announce mass layoffs. So what they have to do is they slowly manage things. So they're having everyone sign these contracts. I like 3 videos ago, I talked about this, where they're having the employees of these massive factories sign these new contracts, and it basically brings your hours down from 30 to 70%. You remain an employee, so you're technically on contract, right? It's very difficult to quit. So everyone just slowly gets poorer, and then the headline mass layoffs never appears in any Russian propaganda outlet. What's interesting about this company, they make the tanks. They make all of Russia's main battle tanks. All of the biggest tanks are made. They even make the Armada, the mythical Armada that's never really gotten into production, that they've really only made for propaganda purposes. T-72s, all the main tanks are made by this company. They are going down to a 4-day work week. Will switch its railcar production employees to a 4-day work week due to declining demand for civilian products. This was reported to Kommersant Earl by the UVZ press service. So this is Russian propaganda managing the local population. The transition applies to a limited number of specialists involved in the civilian sector. And then with each of these layoffs, especially with Avtovaz, for example, that's the largest car company in Russia, when they did this 2 months ago, it immediately came out that it was about a week later that it absolutely wasn't that, and it wasn't merely cutting hours like 15%. It was cutting most down about 70%, so to 30%. The transition applies to a limited number of specialists involved in the civilian sector. The press service reported they emphasized that affected employees have been offered transfers to other areas where orders are secured. So basically, the company is firing all of the civilian workers and moving them over to producing things for the Russian defense industry, tanks, artillery, and while the civilian economy is absolutely imploding, they are mobilizing the entire economy for nothing but war, expanded war. And even as the money dries out, as you saw even in the dying days of the USSR, as I've said many times, when people were drinking cologne in the streets and the IMF was funneling billions to Russia to keep people from starving, the Russians invaded Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Chechnya twice. They started a war in Moldova, tried a war in Georgia, in which they armed separatists and shot down five commercial airlines, destroyed 5 commercial airlines in the space of 2 days. This is what Russia does. This is normal. So they are going to bring this all the way down to the very end. There's not going to be anything but war and hungry Russians. That's what you're going to have. And then the Tsar class. So, and further on the propaganda front, we have the Russian-backed Orban regime in Hungary looking increasingly precarious day by day. As you know, Putin has been losing colonies on an almost monthly basis. It really began with losing Syria. Then it led to there was the Moldovan election. Then there was another Moldovan election. There was a Romanian election. There was the next Romanian election. And Russia has lost all 5 just in the past year. And now the importance of Putin's kleptocratic Hungarian government is now increasingly important to holding together all the ill will that Russians intend to inflict on the good people of the European Union. To read you what I wrote here, Putin's puppet Hungarian government is now blaming Orban's collapsing poll numbers and increased public outrage against them on the evils of Ukraine with a slick taxpayer-funded video. So all these problems. Orban has a guy that is about to unseat him. The electorate loves this guy, Peter Magyar, young, handsome, intelligent, charismatic, in shape, not corrupt, and he is going to unseat this old kleptocracy, and Orban knows it, and this is Putin's guy. And so what's been happening is Orban is increasingly doubling down on his support for Putin, expecting that Putin will do the same. And Putin, to credit Putin, he has been doing this, but it mainly extends to cash and propaganda efforts. So what we have right now is Orban lashing out with a new propaganda campaign and basically blames all these problems. All these problems are now because of Ukraine. Oh, and another thing, it's only 2 weeks ago, the Orban regime was caught, according to Ukrainian intelligence, sending drones into Ukraine, and apparently they're suspected of coordinating missile strikes, and these particular missile strikes were on a U.S. factory owned by a U.S. multinational corporation in the Carpathian Mountains. And I'm sure this will all come out one day, but if this is all true, Orban is completely doubling down on supporting Putin in effort to hold power. So here's the propaganda video to blame everything. All his problems are being now blamed on Ukraine. The Ukrainians are actively working to bring about a change in the government of Hungary. Their intelligence service is deeply involved here. Of course, we are monitoring them and we see what is happening. They have infiltrated Hungarian intellectual life. So anyone with an intelligence is working with Ukrainians. Hungarian political debates. And they have their own party. Tizha is the pro-Ukrainian party. That's the party I mentioned that it's going to unseat Orban, killing him in the polls, by the way. Absolutely, they're absolutely going to unseat him if there's a fair election, including providing technological assistance. He's just blaming everything here on Ukraine and saying that they're trying to rig the election or something, when it's actually Orban and the Russians that are going to do everything they can to rig the elections. And he's saying, we used to blame everything on the Russians. Now it's really all Ukraine. So Orban is increasingly desperate. This is more desperation from the Putin regime, and things are only getting more precarious day by day. And more on Orban. Just yesterday, an investigation came out of the EU. The Russian-backed Orban regime caught running espionage network in Brussels. A major European investigation has uncovered that Hungarian intelligence officers operating under the government of Viktor Orban, likely all being run by the Russians, conducted covert operations inside EU institutions, gathering information on officials and attempting to recruit informants. The findings have triggered an internal probe by the European Commission and deepened concerns over Budapest's alignment with Moscow. You can read the rest at Kyiv Insider. There's a number of outlets that are covering this. So this is a Russian-backed regime knowing that they are going down and increasingly desperate, and they are going to do increasingly desperate things. I believe he's going to go the way of Lukashenko, in which they had an election, in which 80-something% of the people polled voted against him, and then he just failed to honor the election results, and he called Putin. This was in 2020, and then Putin kept him in power. But that was before Russia was busy in Ukraine, and thankfully, brave Ukrainians are keeping Russia far too busy in order to go and bail out the likes of Viktor Orban. And further, talking about desperation, we have Putin is slowly selling Russia, its infrastructure, resource base, and economy to China in exchange for supporting his expanding war aims. Russia intends to facilitate Chinese integration into its economy. The Russian government has submitted a draft law to the State Duma for the ratification of an agreement between the Russian Federation and China on the promotion and mutual protection of investments. This is basically Russia selling China for badly needed cash to continue war efforts. Under this agreement, both countries commit to not impeding and encouraging integration to each other's economy. This is basically Chinese cash. It has nothing to do with Russia. There's no Russian money going into the economy of China. This is China buying the infrastructure. Economy, as well as providing mutual protection for investors and their assets in the territory of the opposing party. However, the document does not take into account the volume of the Chinese economy, which significantly surpasses that of the Russian Federation. Yes, this is a one-way ticket, man. This is, Russians are starting to notice, that things are, there's only one way that all this is going to go. So on to the Russian atrocities. Last night here in Kyiv, we had a massive missile attack. This was ballistic missiles. And normally, like myself and others that I know, we don't go underground unless it's ballistics, because the Shahed drones are almost every night and you can't live underground. But when it's ballistic missiles, people go underground. These are missiles generally manufactured in North Korea. They've got, up to 2-ton warheads, and they're massive, and they're loud when they strike. So it's best just to go underground. So no one really got any sleep, myself included. So sorry if I'm missing any beats today. So in last night's attacks, one of the many victims today, Russians murdered a 7-year-old boy in Zaporizhia. The boy's father had recently been freed from 3 years in Russian captivity. Resulting from today's attack, the father will likely lose his legs. This is what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I can let you see the clip for yourself if you want. At 2:22 fire, when they arrived, the 9th Brigade took her husband's brother. This is one of the neighbors talking about it. I'm not sure if they can save his legs or not. He just got out of Russian captivity. He was a soldier. The Russians grabbed him and held him and tortured him for 3 years. He came home, and only a few months after he's come home, his house is bombed. They brought out the child, nearly dead. Well, there was a faint pulse. I don't know. Doctors tried to save the boy, but couldn't save them. Destroyed windows, doors, all was left of it. Anyway, this is down in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region, where Russians, mainly ballistic missiles here in Kyiv, but down in the Zaporizhia region, it was Russians hammering everything with everything. They got ballistic missiles, cab bombs, Shaheds, raining them on the residential buildings, as Russians always do. And I'll read you what I wrote here. As long as Russians are allowed to have money, they will continue to pour the world's impoverished classes in front of Ukrainian artillery. 25,000 Cubans coming to Ukraine only because the West is afraid to let Ukraine destroy Russian oil production. And this is regarding the Russians are just gathering the impoverished masses of the world. Poverty is an integral part of Putin's model. They are sending 25,000 Cubans into Ukraine. So not just Africans and North Koreans. It's basically going to be everyone on earth. The average salary in Cuba is something like $12 a month. So the offer of anything above $1,000, even if the average survival time is less than 12 days, that really doesn't matter. It's worth the risk. Keeping life cheap is the main core of these authoritarian kleptocracies. Make life cheap so the impoverished masses are desperate to do anything. And so how is the Russian regime handling all of this? I mean, okay, I'll read you what I wrote here. The Twitter feeds of Putin's team are now just nonstop festivals of kissing Trump's ass. A bit late for that. Time to pay the bill as the Russian economy continues to spiral. So this is Kirill Dmitriev. He was the, quote, lead negotiator. And now his feed is just basically ripping on Biden, talking about QAnon, anything they can do to kiss Trump's ass. And this is Dmitriev saying, President Trump thanks his team for the successful work on the Gaza peace plan. Right. No, the Gaza peace plan is not in Russia's best interest, as I just showed you with the oil chart. Russians are hating this. And the first chance they get, they're going to arm Hamas or bomb whatever they can in Syria, or arm the Houthis, or provide intelligence, all the things they've been doing for decades. This is not in their interest, but Russia wants Trump to think that they're happy about it, that they're on the side of the Trump administration. But it shows you another level of desperation. And now, just for a reminder that why Ukrainians fight, it's essentially that the real killing does not begin until the Russians have control. And we have seen this in every region of Ukraine that Russians have managed to occupy, that Ukrainians can fight now, or they can die slowly over decades. I'll read you what Kyiv Insider wrote. Here's what Russians did to the Kyiv suburb of Bucha in just the 6 weeks they managed to occupy it. Now you understand why Russia itself looks as it does after 300 years of the same. This is the Kyiv suburb of Bucha, in which they killed, tortured, raped, and committed all other elements of Russian culture on the local population for about 6 weeks. They killed everything, including pets. They put a baby in a washing machine, forcing the... they did horrible things to families. I don't even know if I can say any of this stuff on YouTube. They committed atrocities that are absolutely the worst atrocities that you can imagine. And this is all normal stuff for the Russians everywhere that they've gone, everywhere that they've managed to occupy in Ukraine. So I just wanted to leave you with these pictures. This is all rebuilt now, by the way. Civilization has won. And I don't know, this looks like your average Russian city outside the 3 central rings of Moscow. Believe me, I've been there, and this isn't far off. Yeah. So anyway, guys, have a good day, and keep up the fight. Have a good one.